Okay. Well, welcome to, I think it's our fourth, maybe fifth installment of the CCH2 data portal lunch breaks. And today we're going to be talking about managing images in CCH2, specifically using the images tab and some of the other tools. So I'm going to take a step back first and talk about, in general, how images are dealt with in Symbiota portals, just so you have some context for what we're going to talk about. I'll talk about a couple of quirks that you may have run into or have questions about regarding images in Symbiota. And then I'm going to talk about the images tab and all of the little tools that you can use to add, edit, delete, and remap images. And then I'll briefly talk about the system that we use in the California Phonology Network, which is using Cybers and some of the batch processing tools. So first, to kind of zoom out and talk about how images are dealt with in Symbiota portals. So very generally, the data regarding the specimens, so the collector, the scientific name, the date, all that kind of stuff, is held in a table called the Occurrence table. And then the images are held somewhere else. They don't even have to be in the same physical computer or server. They can be anywhere, as long as that computer or server can create a URL for that for those images. So even when you put the data, quote unquote, or an image, quote unquote, in CCH2, you're actually just putting that image in the server that is associated with your portal. So all the occurrences are in a certain server, and then all the images may be in that server or some completely other server. And then they're linked to the occurrences, to the occurrence table, through a separate table called the images table. And this is linked to the occurrences by the unique identifiers. So you have in your occurrence table, there's a list of unique identifiers. And then in the images table, there's a list of unique identifiers. And the reason why you don't just have an occurrence table with another column that says image link is because you might have many images for one occurrence. And so that's what this kind of database structure of having multiple different tables allows for, is a one-to-many relationship is what they call it. So one specimen can be associated with many images. And so those are all in the images table. So when I'm talking about deleting images and remapping images and stuff like that, note that that's basically remapping this line in the images table to be with a different occurrence or a different specimen. So just kind of keep this structure in mind as I'm talking through kind of some of the tools that we have. Okay, a couple of quirks you might run into is problems with rotated images. You'll notice that there are some relatively new tools in CCH2 where you can rotate the image right there in the occurrence editor. However, that's not a permanent rotation feature. That's just for if you see something that you need to read that's sideways. If you ever come across images that are rotated just in the portal and you would have to rotate them to just see them straight up, then those are probably issues that need to be fixed with the image themselves and not in CCH2. And one problem that we often come up against is that there are two main ways of rotating images. And one of them is by using what's called an EXIF tag, which is a tag in the metadata of the image that says, rotate this direction, computer. And some browsers will do that, and some browsers can't read EXIF tags, and so then they're not going to be rotated. So it's very confusing. A way to get around this is using the other way to rotate images, which is to physically rotate the pixels. So some softwares, when you just say rotate an image, will say great, I'll just stick this tag on it that says, please rotate. And then another software will physically move all the pixels onto their side. So things like Lightroom will do physical rotation of all the pixels. But if you just use like Windows Photo Viewer, I think it just sticks a tag, an EXIF tag onto it. So if you ever have troubles with rotation of your images and you're like, I rotated them, but then I uploaded them and they're still showing up rotated, it might be because the way that you're rotating them isn't using that actual pixel rotation type of way. Another image quirk that you've probably run into a few times in CCH2 is what we call ghost images. It's when it just shows up as kind of a box, like an image is supposed to be here, but it hasn't shown up. And there are multiple reasons for this occurring. And one of them is because of cybers, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Another reason is because some institutions who host their own images in their own servers have an HTTP instead of an HTTPS link. So S is the secure version. And Chrome nowadays will not show images unless they're in HTTPS. So if you come across images in CCH2 that you're trying to view and you can't, you might try opening them up in a different browser. And a ghost image can also indicate a broken URL. And so that happens either from like a Cyverse registration issue, or maybe the image was deleted or it was moved. So you might come across that in not only CCH2, but other Symbiotic portals when images got moved to different servers and that link in the images table wasn't updated. So just a couple of things to look out for. Okay, now let's talk about specifically the Images tab. And to access the Images tab, you will go to whatever specimen you want to look at. So I'm going to go into my profile, occurrence management, and then I'm just going to click on any random specimen. Here we go. And then the Images tab is right up here in the Occurrence Manager. And you'll see that right off, pretty much all you can see are some metadata fields. If you want to edit those metadata fields, you just click on this little pencil. If you wanted to add a single image, then you could click this Add New Image button. However, as you guys are mostly aware, we don't do a lot of adding straight into the Symbiotic portal. And the reason for that is because when you add straight through this interface here, it puts that image on the server where CCH2 lives. So that's actually an Arizona State University server. And we're trying to keep all of our images in Cyverse so that they are local there, because ASU doesn't have the infrastructure to necessarily hold all of our images. So it's just kind of best in a housekeeping sense to put all of your images in Cyverse, because then if like something goes wrong with one or the other, you're not like, oh shoot, some of my images were over here, but some of them were over here. And then you have to fix them in both places or something like that. So to edit and to use all of the tools that are in the Images tab, you just click this pencil button right here, and then you can go through these boxes. So the things that you can edit in terms of image metadata is you can give it a caption, you can select a user from the database to credit as the photographer. Allison, you have a question?
Yeah, are you saying if we click the pencil and do the edit image data option, that goes to Cyverse?
No, because the data that you're editing here is going to be kind of metadata associated with it, and that actually is stored in the Images tab along, or the Images table, along with all the data. The only thing that we get from Cyverse is the URL.
Oh, I see. So the image, the extra image would be sent to Cyverse, and we put in here what Cyverse needs to know where to link it to. Is that what you're?
Kind of the other way around. Our batch image processing goes to Cyverse and grabs all the URLs from them.
Okay, I think
and then
I
they
get
just
it.
Store them in the table. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end when we're talking about Cyverse. So here, this data that you're looking at right here is what you would find in the images table. And let me again bring up the relationship of the images table. So occurrence table is the data that you see in the occurrence data tab. And then the images table is all the stuff that you see in the images tab. And this again is in CCH2, but the actual physical location, digital location of the photos could be somewhere, anywhere else. So the URL is shown here. So if you had a problem with broken links and you needed to replace a link, you could put that here into one of the URL fields. Usually the large version of the URL is put in large image URL, and then there's a thumbnail that is created either by the institution or the server that is providing the image, or CCH2 has an ability to create a thumbnail right there in the portal. But I think for both Cyverse and for the previous iDigBio media ingestion appliance, they would provide a separate link for the large image and for the thumbnail. Some other things that you can change are you can put a different copyright. You can edit the sort sequence, and this means the sequence in which you're going to see that image if there were multiple images on that page. So if you had like one's a label image and one is an image of the actual specimen, you could say, oh, I want the specimen to be number 1 and the label to be number 2. This happens often with like lichen and bryophyte collections because it's harder to take a picture of the label and the specimen. So if you need to do any ordering, you can do that right here. There are also some metadata tags that you can use. They're not widely used right now, and there's currently no way of batch editing tags, but I believe that that's going to be in development in the near future because having these tags will eventually be really important for linking this data to other types of data. So just keep that in mind that that exists right now. Okay, so these are all the tools, all the things that you can do to edit the image metadata, so the data about that image. Here you can also delete images, and a slightly confusing thing is that if you delete the image here, then all it will do is it will remove this line from the images table. It'll say no longer is there any URL associated with this unique identifier, or at least this URL is no longer associated with this unique identifier. If the image had been uploaded to ASU servers, you could click this remove image from server and click delete image. But because our images are in Cyverse, CCH2 has no ability to delete images that are in Cyverse. So clicking remove image from server is not going to do anything for our images because the images don't actually live in the same server with the occurrence data. If you need to actually physically, completely delete an image, you would have to actually access me. You have to tell me that you want to delete it in Cyverse because there are only a couple of people who have permissions to delete files in Cyverse. Another really useful thing that you can do is remap images to different specimens. So what that essentially does is changes this unique identifier to be associated with some other unique identifier. So that same image belonging to some URL is given to a different occurrence. And that's really helpful when things get mislinked, which we've had pretty often. Sometimes they'll have the same accession number or someone will mistype the accession number. And so 2 completely different images get associated with one record. And in that case, you can come down here to this remap to another specimen. And then if you click Open Occurrence Linking Aid, it will open up a window that will help you find the specimen that you want to link this image to. So you could have the image open up here and then open up the window right here and say, okay, it looks like I need I don't know if I have a duplicate here, but you could say Hoover 8154. And you can search and it will show you right here. Okay, here's one that's Hoover 8154, collected in San Luis Obispo, 6 miles east of Creston, blah, blah, blah. And you could make sure that that matches the label of the actual specimen you're trying to remap. And if you clicked select occurrence record, it would put a number, and this is the unique identifier number, into this, and then you could click remap image. And so what that would do is take that image and all of the data associated with it, image metadata, that is, not the occurrence data, just the image metadata. So the tags, the photographer, the notes, anything that's in this little form right here, that will go with that image to the other occurrence. So it won't take, it will just associate that image with all the other data. If you don't find a match, or if you're like, oh shoot, this doesn't belong to this specimen, but I don't think we have that specimen transcribed, then you can either click create new occurrence from this right here. So that was when I clicked open occurrence linking aid and then create new occurrence, or you can just click link new occurrence if you already know that that specimen doesn't exist. So that would just take that image and its metadata. So again, the photographer, the caption, those things that are only associated with the image, and it will put it into a brand new occurrence. And there will be no data associated with that occurrence, no catalog number, no scientific name, nothing, because you're just putting this naked image in with an empty occurrence. And then the last option is disassociate image. And that means I'm just going to get rid of basically this unique identifier number, because this is linking it specifically to the occurrence table. You're saying, I don't want this associated with any occurrence anymore. And that would be probably not used very often. I would say delete image instead of disassociate image, but if you want to, you can do it that way. Okay, so those are the things you can do in the image tab. And I want to say a couple things about batch image processing. And so we do this through the image processing profiles. If you go back into collection management and then processing toolbox, you can create an import profile in many different ways. We use this iPlant image processing. Cyverse once upon a time was called iPlant. So if you see iPlant versus Cyverse in places, know that they are synonymous. And what this does is it goes to Cyverse and asks, hey, do you have any new images that belong to this particular folder location? And if Cyverse does, it said, yes, here are all the URLs. And then those URLs get attached to the catalog numbers. That's essentially what the iPlant image processing or Cyverse image processing profile does. We have set up these profiles for each of the California Phonology Network projects. Like, they do have to be set up because there is a pattern matching term that has to be created specific to your collection. But if you ever need to do this for some reason, just let me know and I can walk you through that. Another thing that you can do, which we won't be doing at all probably, is you can upload images from a local or remote server, or you could even just upload a spreadsheet that has a link of all the catalog numbers, or a column of all the catalog numbers and a column of all the URLs. And you can map it just as if you were uploading data as a skeletal or full text file. Again, we're probably not going to do this at all, but just so you know that that option exists in Symbiota. So a couple notes about images in Cyverse. How this works is Cyverse stores our images in its community data servers, and it uses a tool, or at least based on my understanding, called Bisq to generate web accessible URLs. And those URLs are what CCH2 grabs and stores in the images table using that image processing tool that I showed you just a second ago. And this URL creation step can take a couple of days depending on how busy the Bisq servers are. So you might remember there was a time, I think 2 years ago, when like images could not be attached to their CCH2 records for like a straight week. I think that was just because the Bisq servers were super busy. And also because these images are stored in Bisq servers, when the Bisq servers undergo maintenance, which I believe is the first Tuesday of every month, sometimes the images look broken. You'll have a bunch of ghost images in your portal. So if you suddenly see that, oh no, all my images are missing, make sure it's not a Tuesday or sometimes the Wednesday afterwards, because sometimes it's just because of maintenance. There are some glitches in Cyverse that we've identified for whatever reason. Sometimes Bisq will miss images when you're trying to link them to your CCH2 records. And we have talked to Cyverse about this, and it's probably just like a capacity, or at least I assume some sort of network connectivity issue on their end. I don't really know, but sometimes images are missed. So we've asked them to run a couple of scripts that try to find images that don't have URLs and then create them. But this does require us to run the image processing tool again to make sure that those ones that have been given URLs are actually pulled into CCH2. So if you find some big discrepancy, like, hey, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to have 20,000, but only 17,000 are showing up, just let me know and we can try to troubleshoot that and probably run the image processing tool again and see whether some things got missed down the line. And then I think this happened when there was a Bisq outage, but sometimes images will get re-registered with a different URL, like the old URL breaks and then there is a new one that is given to it. I don't know why, but this can be fixed if you delete that image and then rerun the image processor, and then it will hopefully go find the new and improved URL afterwards. So if the problem persists, you can always contact me and Cyverse and we can help troubleshoot. It's a little bit of a complicated little runaround system, but we've seen a lot of things so far, so we can usually get through them. All right, and that's all I have to share about images in CCH2 for now. Any questions?
I'm interested in adding additional images that are not specimen images. Is that a different process or a different tutorial for another day? Like, for instance, I've long appreciated when people take pictures of aphyllons because they're succulent and full of oxidative compounds and they turn into little brown lumps on the sheet. And so people used to glue 3x5 glossies onto the herbarium sheet, which is fine in the case of aphyllons because they're small, so there's room. But these days, wouldn't it be cool to be able to upload a fresh image of the plant? And so that's maybe a totally different thing, a protocol. I don't know.
Yeah, and we don't have like really straightforward ways of doing that yet. If it's associated with a specimen, so it's just like a field image of the specimen,
that's what it would be.
You can totally import that. You can upload that right into the portal along with the occurrence, or you could even put it in Cyverse and just make sure that it has like the catalog number associated with that specimen is the title, and then probably with a suffix that says like field or in situ or whatever.
Would it be through this tool, this tab, images tab, like you've just described, or is it a different process?
You could do it either individually in the images tab, or you could upload them to Cyverse just as if they were specimen images. Both will work the same way.
And if I did something like that, is it advisable to edit the image so that it has some sort of identifier right on the image before I upload it, or can it just be tied as a file name? Or
it doesn't have to be. It can be just tied as a file name. Yeah, because it'll be connected to it like in the database world, in the database tables.
But just with that little checkbox suffix, this is an image of the mature specimen. Or you showed us that there was a qualifier and it had like 10 options. I didn't notice if there was a custom option or whether we just choose one of those. This is an immature specimen. This is a mature specimen. I forget what the other ones were.
Yeah, I think there is one of it being in the field. Let's see. No, it doesn't.
Field image of habitat. Well, that's
of
habitat. Yeah.
Of habitat. Yeah, that is hard.
I guess I choose the image shows an organism.
Organism, and it's a field image. I mean,
yeah,
it will probably contain habitat.
Yeah, okay. So that's all that image would say. Like obviously our specimens have everything right in the image. I don't yeah.
Yeah, you probably would not need to put any metadata in the physical image. And so there are a lot of collections, not so much in CCH2, but I believe in SciNet, which is the southeastern and kind of everywhere other than California and a couple of other places, herbaria that will add field images to their records. And I'm trying to come up with.
I can find that later. That's fine. That's a useful hint.
Yeah, and people are doing some pretty creative things with the images tab because you can put any URL in there. I know that Mike Simpson has actually been putting iNaturalist links there, and it doesn't always upload. I don't think it uploads the image, like you can't see it in CCH2, but it does create a link to the iNaturalist record. I gotta go see whether he figured that out. There are lots of developments underway to link specimens to like iNaturalist records, because that would be really neat to have, because you have all those great field images in iNaturalist. They're not done yet, but I know that they are coming.
So maybe this is something that it'd be smart to wait a little bit, like 6 months or something, before I try to mess with this sort of thing.
Maybe. I mean, if you have the images accessible via a URL, you could put the URL in, or you could just upload them straight into CCH2. That works too. It's not going to break anything.
Okay. Might try that.
This might be one that has an example. Oh yeah, here's a great example. This is in SDSU. So I think what this person did is they just uploaded these field images into the iDig Biomedia ingestion appliance, which is what we were using before Cyverse. And they must have associated them with this specific catalog number. And then when they ran the processing tool, all those images came along with that catalog number. So
perfect. Okay.
In the public, then it will look like this. So you can see all the
that's great. And they each have 2 sizes of image. So I wonder if they created the 2 sizes themselves.
Well, our images will do that as well, just like the Cyverse ones.
Oh, it'll do it after the fact, so I wouldn't have to put 2 images.
Yeah, so if you put things in Cyverse, so here's the Bisq URL that it comes up with. Remember, Bisq is the funny utility that makes the URLs. And then it creates several sizes for us. So it's very convenient. This will just give us this URL for the thumbnail and also for the web URL and also for the large. So if you put it in
a large size,
Cyverse,
it looks like.
Yeah, if you put it in Cyverse, then it will automatically create these other sizes too.
And 400, that must be, or 4,000, that must be 4,000 pixels tall or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Here's another example.
Very nice.
Thanks for sharing. Genevieve shared this link.
Oh, fantastic.
You got your grasp. Perfect.
So
this one doesn't even have a specimen image. It's just.
Yeah, so there was a collection number, but it hasn't been specimened yet. But then Orange County Ag Commissioner went back and made an official collection at that site as a later one. So there's going to be specimens associated with this occurrence, which is really nice to have in CCH2. And so they sent me the CCH2 link and I was like, oh, that's so cool. And it's really helpful because I just got a batch of photos from one of our retired entomologists, and I'm going to use, I think I can use that as the model to link the collection localities of occurrences for photographs of plants, because he takes a bunch of different views of a plant to kind of associate occurrence with the one-to-many, even though there's not a specimen, but I can use that as observation rather than a specimen, and then it'll flow over to cow flora, which is what his point is. But I like that Dynebra example because it was really useful for purposes of communicating like what the plants look like, all the habitat information, and yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, and that brings up an important point that if you have something that's not a specimen, you can create an occurrence record for it. I would just caution you to make sure to flag it as not a specimen. And a way to do that is when you are in this occurrence management, you can go all the way down to where it says basis of record, and you can change it to human observation, because anything that doesn't have a physical voucher specimen either on its way to being in an herbarium or in an herbarium is just an observation. And so anything that's like just an iNaturalist observation without an associated specimen, or just a bunch of pictures of a species in a specific place, that's still an observation.
Great, thank you.
My pleasure.
Got another meeting, so I'll sign off, but this was
okay,
fantastic.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for joining me. I'm going to stop recording now.